Good morning, everyone. My name is James Voorhies, and I am the Curator-at-Large here at the 𝗃𝗃. It's really great to see so many familiar faces, also a lot of new faces. Thank you very much for being here. I want to first start just by thanking our director, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 for her support of our work and for bringing us all here together today, too. So thank you, Sylvia. Today's program, as you know, is organized on the occasion of Jack Pierson, the Miami Years. It's the third exhibition in the Miami Years series that I've had the pleasure of organizing, and we began this series 3 years ago. And I want to provide just a few minutes to give a little bit of background about kind of like how we got here. When we began this series, the aim was to look at Miami not simply as a setting, but as an active and sometimes catalytic presence in an artist's life and work. As some of you know, and some of you have witnessed the exhibitions, over the past 3 years, we've presented 𝗏𝗠𝗏 a couple years ago. Last year, we had an exhibition on Rachel Feinstein. And this year, of course, we now have Jack Pierson, the Miami Years. And across these 3 exhibitions and across 3 years, the series has revealed how Miami's blend of internationalism, its intensity, its beauty, the contradictions, the imagination has shaped rich and incredible practices in distinct and enduring ways. And with each exhibition, too, as we proceeded, we've revealed something that we didn't quite know about each of the artists, or maybe that was there and wasn't quite amplified. With Pike, we recovered a surprising blind spot in the scholarship. The incredible extent of his work and his life in Miami and what he did in Miami at the airport with the commissions that he made in the 1980s and early 1990s, and the fact that also 𝗏𝗠𝗏 bought an apartment here on Ocean Drive at 14th Street in 1988, and he lived between Miami Beach and New York City until his passing in Miami Beach in 2006. With Rachel, we saw how the aesthetics of Miami, its boldness, its theatricality, its friction between ornament and decay, remain an undercurrent in the formal decisions that she makes about her sculptures and her installations. And with Jack, the presence of Miami has been long apparent in the writing and the discourse around his work, and surfacing in subtle and atmospheric ways. With this exhibition comes into clearer vision of what I've been calling a kind of jewel box exhibition, or a very concise survey of Miami's impact on his work. And so to that end, Jack Pierson, the Miami Years, departs from the winter of 1984, when Jack spent his first period in Miami Beach. And what began as a brief escape from New York became a 6-month or so chapter of creative experimentation and personal transformation. And it was Miami. It was the landscape, the nightlife, the beach, the thrift store economy, the looseness of the place that collectively nurtured a sense of possibility and that continues to resonate across the broad scope of his work today, and the fluid movement of his practice between mediums, between images and spaces and materials that define his practice. Miami, too, was in a moment of transformation. The Art Deco revival was rising. Art, fashion, celebrity cultures were intertwining, and the city's glamour carried its own kind of like electric tension. One could feel the cultural shift in the 80s, with Miami becoming a site where local scenes, where international visitors, experimental artistic and creative impulses all converged here in Miami Beach. And then, of course, by the early 2000s, the arrival of Art Basel, Miami Beach, which is here. The city's position as a kind of global crossroads of contemporary art became unmistakable and is today. But that energy had already left a lasting imprint on Jack during the 1980s and early 1990s, when the transformations were first taking shape. Jack Pierson, the Miami Years, traces these impressions, the changing atmosphere of the city, the way its light surfaces and its lived rhythms seeped into his photographs and text works, and the everyday details that shape an exciting moment in his artistic and his personal trajectories. And in bringing these elements together, Miami Years reveals how Miami's character has been absorbed into that structure of his images and his art. And so after 3 years of looking at Miami through this lens, Jack's exhibition actually returns us to some of the guiding questions that were initiated and things that Sylvia and I had initially talked about when thinking about what this series could do and be. How does Miami, its internationalism, these complex, these layered histories, these cultural collisions, these contradictions, this space of Miami as a global arts center that we're experiencing at this very moment today, leave a mark on an artist? And how do those impressions reappear, shift, and endure across a lifetime of making? And it is, to say the least, is meaningful to be here today for a conversation that draws together and potentially addresses some of these threads and have a chance to look at some of these questions together. But before we hear from Jack and Klaus, I do want to just briefly introduce them. Jack Pierson was born in Matamet, Massachusetts, and lives between and works between New York and California. Since the 1980s, as we know, his practice has developed an influential and wide-ranging practice, moving fluidly between photography, sculpture, drawing, painting, video, and installation. His work is exhibited internationally. It's held in many major public collections: the Art Institute of Chicago, LACMA, ICA Boston, Guggenheim, the Met, the Walker, just to cite a few. Klaus Biesenbach is a German-American curator and museum director. Since January 2022, he has served as director of the Neue Nationalgalerie, the Berggruen Museum, the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 collection, as well as the Berlin Modern and Contemporary, currently under construction in Berlin. Previously, he served as the director of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. He is a former curator-at-large at MoMA and former director of MoMA PS1. Klaus is also the founding director of the Kunstwerk Institute for Contemporary Art in Berlin and the Berlin Biennale. And to say the least, it's an honor to have both of them here today, and also just another word of thanks to Jack and all of his team in the galleries and the crew here at the museum, because it has been a real pleasure working on this exhibition with everybody. So thank you, Jack. Please join me in welcoming Jack Pierson and Klaus Biesenbach.
Thank you, James, for that lovely introduction.
Thank you, James. And thank you, Sylvia.
And Sylvia.
For having us here. I thought nobody would be here because I looked 10:30. Isn't that the opening of the fair? Aren't these art world people who are like greedy, hungry cats running for breakfast? So I'm quite flattered. Thank you.
And I saw you 20 minutes ago at 𝗃𝗃. I was like, oh, he's not there. I can stay a little longer.
I was here earlier.
I know, but you were here.
What I enjoyed, James, was you talking about Nam-June Paik. I had no idea. I saw the show here, but I never read wall text. So I had no idea he lived here. And when you talked about the Miami years of, for example, Nam-June Paik, not to compare, he's like a great artist. And then your Miami years, and I had Miami years. I'd never thought about it. And my Miami years are 10 years later than yours, of the 90s. And the founder, director, curator extraordinaire, Alana Heiss, who invented MoMA PS1 and many things, she also invented that art and music both fit into the same museum at the same time on actual curatorial programs. And she would take all her delinquent young curators, like me in the 90s, to Miami. There used to be something, Sylvia, does this still exist, the Winter Music Conference? So I'm an alum. I'm from the alumni class of 1992 and 93 and 94, 95 and 96 and 97, 98, 99. And we used to go to the Winter Music Conference, and it was wild. Miami, whoa. I don't have many memories, but that's always when you have a good party, you don't remember much, right? But I do remember we all stayed in the Art Deco district, and we all had our headquarters in the Winter Haven, Winter Haven is one of these little hotels. I think it's on 14th Street and the beach. And so in the mornings when you wanted to avoid to go to the lobby because it was like 6 a.m. or whatever, so you went to the backside. There was an alley behind. So I thought, oh, today, this morning, I better go through the alley. So I quietly approached the hotel, and I see something. It was like, OMG. There were 4 people holding parasols. It was 6 a.m., there was no sun, but they were holding parasols. And there was a person in the middle between the 4, under the sun umbrellas. And I just wanted to get home because I really wanted to get to bed. So I wanted to squeeze through these 5 people. And it was Michael Jackson with 4 people in the parasol.
Wow.
So you see, I have my one memory of the 90s.
Well, that's a pretty good one.
That's Miami.
Mine would be walking home from Voorhies, which is on the corner of 20th Street here, late at night, back to 1st Street and Washington. It's far. And around 10th Street, a white van, there was a guy riding, like an adult riding a Stingray child's bicycle, and a white van pulled up next to him. The people jumped out, grabbed him, threw him in the side, and drove home. And I was like, what?
What?
Anyway, I don't know if it
Well, I guess both of what we witnessed, both of these appearances are not with us anymore, so.
Right.
But I remember it was a very, very, very different place. What was your first impression when you arrived in Miami?
Well, like, you know, in 1984, we got here, we drove to South Beach. I don't know how we knew to drive to South Beach or drive that far down. I don't know how we figured out, but it was well below 5th. And there was a hotel at that time, I think it was called the Calvert Arms, and the whole lobby was covered with glitter, big, chunky glitter. Everything was covered with glitter. The frames, the this, the that, and it was, what wasn't covered with glitter was painted like high gloss hot pink. And it was run by this little old lady, and she was really old. And it was $50 a night, which seemed, you know, kind of less than $50 a night probably then. And she'd hand you a half a bar that had been sawed in half of Ivory soap and this thin towel that had been washed 3,000 times. It was like this thin. She'd give you that, and she'd say, like, and don't bring anybody up to the room. And we checked in there, and I don't know, it was just awash with all the Art Deco and the stuff, like a hotel covered with glitter at that point, and like old people. And most of them were boarded up. Like the thing that became the Versace mansion was boarded. Like nobody was there except, I think, squatters. So it was a whole different thing. It was only old people and kind of Marielitos, which were the Cubans that...
Well, I have a different memory. It was not all old people. Most people I met...
in 95, it was like coming back up. They had Miami Vice there. But in 84, it was, you know, and ex-cons and me.
What was interesting was to be, we were at this Art World breakfast, the 𝗶𝗵𝗲 breakfast. It's an international breakfast, and I'm here with my colleague Lisa from Berlin, and it's your first time in Miami, right?
What do you think?
So last night we went to the 𝗃𝗏 opening or whatever, and there was a time, James discussed it, that in 2001, Art Basel was announced. Art Basel Miami Beach was announced, and we all had everything booked, and then September 11th happened. It was delayed a year, so Art Basel, the first one was 2001, didn't happen. Then the first one that happened was 2002. And then Jeffrey Deitch was off to the races immediately, and he imprinted that Art Basel was like, the main galleries had main brand parties. I don't know if you remember this. There used to be the Jeffrey Deitch party, and it was on the beach. And then museums used to compete. There was a 𝗃𝗏 party, And then there was the 𝗃𝗲 𝗠𝗶𝗺 𝗬𝗲. I, of course, think the 𝗃𝗲 𝗠𝗶𝗺 won. We had like a Kim Kardashian lookalike contest with 2,000 people competing for the trophy. And so I think we won, whatever. So that was the early noughts. But now you go for breakfast. We went yesterday. It was very civilized. And my colleague said, wow, I had a very different idea of Miami. So I think it's all shifting and changing. But I want to talk about you, not about Miami. We have talked enough. We come back to Miami because we love Miami. So you and I were born worlds apart, but only a few years apart. I was a late bloomer. I was very shy about things. You seemingly not. You were born in around 1960. So were you like a wild kid, and you knew when did you know you were an artist?
Kind of not. I guess right around the time I came here, I was starting to figure it out. But like, I wasn't a kid that grew up thinking like being an artist was an option. Like I've never, like, I don't know.
When was your first artwork? I asked Jeff Koons, when was your first artwork? And he thought about it. I made no art. And he said, what was your first artwork? Oh, I had to study or whatever. I said, what was your first artwork? And then he said, oh, I was like 9 and I made a porcelain balloon dog for the design store of my father, and we put it in the window, and everybody thought, what is that balloon dog? So he did that when he was like 9. So when was your first artwork? Come on, loosen up a little bit. Think about it. Do you photograph your classmates?
No. I mean, I don't know. I colored, I painted, whatever. The first artwork I ever made was a painting, not ever made, but as a person who had been to art school and now knew artistic friends, I made a painting that was in a show in Provincetown in 1980 at the Art Guild there. And it was an abstract painting.
When did you study art?
From like 1980 to 1983.
So you studied art but didn't think you were an artist?
Kind of, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a working class kid. You don't think like, oh, I'm gonna be an artist. You think like, how am I gonna support myself? So I was trying to be like a graphic designer. I kind of thought like the best I could hope for at that time was that I would make like leather belts or silver jewelry, and I could work the crafts fair circuit and like make things, and that seemed like a nice life to me. Or, you know, selling flea market things. That's sort of what I had. All I knew was what I didn't want to be, you know, a square and work in an office or something like that. So if I could travel around, make stuff and sell it. So I guess that's a version of artistic. I fell in with 𝗃𝗵𝗵 and Mark Morrisroe, the well-known late photographer. And they were worse than working class kids. But they had this idea of like, you know, they were going to be famous artists. And I was like, all right, great. And so like from hanging around with them, I kind of got like, really, this is, you know, an option. We can be artists. And so it was good on that level to get that from them. They were older than me. And part of what made Miami great to me is that I left them, came here, and felt like, oh, I can do whatever I want my way.
But your parents were supportive with you being an art student?
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I went to art school to be a graphic designer, which to me meant like design Talking Heads album covers. But like really being a graphic designer is doing brochures for, you know, housing, you know, real estate or something like that. And you have to be really like, the graphic designers were like the yuppies. And I got, within the first 3 months, pulled into the performance department by a teacher who was like, what are you doing here? You should be here. And so I studied performance in mass art.
Wow, very successfully, I guess. Wow.
I know.
For me, it's always so surprising somebody knows they are art students. Like, when you are a law student, you're going to become a lawyer, right? When you're an art student, you better become an artist. I was actually a medical student, and I wanted to do an internship in the art world, and nobody wanted me because I was a medical student. So I started my own museum, But that was completely, I didn't know what a curator was. So,
Right.
But that was like an accident.
Yeah.
So there's something people call the Boston School. And you are often associated with the Boston School.
Yeah.
But the Boston School also is, in years that you describe, you weren't really an artist yet.
Well, yeah, I was hanging around.
Everybody knows what the Boston School is like. Most famously, Morris Rowe and Nan Goldin and David Armstrong hanging out, photographing each other, kind of like scantily clad on the beach, making love and being in love and expressing something like truth and beauty, youth, fragility, human nature, human condition, as if it's a play of youth and coming of age. It's very poetic, very, very beautiful work. So I'm like, I first started with a little like making it bad, and now I'm in love with the Boston School. It's something very important, I think.
Nice, that's good. Because I think, no, it wasn't invented in Germany. It was invented by Leah Gangitano, who did a show of us at the ICA in Boston. And I think what defines it the most is we were people living in Boston hoping for something better. So you think of Nan's early photographs of Boston, they're all self-focused, drag queens walking through, the Commons, but like it could be Paris in the 30s. And I think what a town like Boston does is, like, you have to come up with something to make it interesting. And we came up with this like glamorized notion of life, which I think comes a lot out of, I think we're all sort of fans, it sounds so square now, but like of John Singer Sargent at the MFA, and it was pictures of beautiful people.
It doesn't sound like in any way like a platitude. As I was just recently in the Singer Sargent show in Paris. Of course, there was a Metropolitan Museum, but somehow it was really sexy in Paris. And I could totally see that the Boston School responded to that.
I mean, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody else say it, but that's what I think it was. It was seeing so many John Singer Sargents at the MFA there. And you just thought like, okay, that's the life I want. And so if I have to be an artist to do it, I'll be an artist.
I think what Leah Gangitano, and she's a great, great curator, what she coins there as a school, coins there as an aesthetic is very important, and it informs how we look at your exhibition here. It informs how we look at this whole generation. Also, of course, the names I just summed up briefly before, you realize half of them died in the 90s. So that's also something, the Boston School, not all of you guys survived. So when you think about yourself as an artist, you said, oh, I studied art, but I wanted to more design belts and album covers, and then you went into performance. If I imagine the Boston School, and the last time I mentioned them because I want to focus on your work, but in a strange way, film, music, even a photograph and a photograph and a photograph and music somehow become cinematic. So you have fashion, you have lifestyle, you have music, you have film. What were the influences for you guys at the time?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak for them, but I can speak for me.
Just for you.
If you look at the big piece in my show, the Miami Beach Array, on the right, the very first thing is a still from Midnight Cowboy. So Midnight Cowboy in the 70s probably came out in 1969, I'm not sure, in 1970. I was 9 years old. It was rated X. I can't tell you what seeing an ad in the paper for a movie rated X did to me as an actor, like, what? And people were talking about it. And I remember I had older brothers. And part of my formation is that, like, there's 15 years between me and the next closest brother, but there were 3 of them. So I was living with teenagers who I thought were cool. You know what I mean? Like, they just seemed like, And I wanted to be like them. And somehow one of them had gone to Midnight Cowboy with their girlfriend, which now seems unimaginable. The little old lady wife, like she went to Midnight Cowboy and she came back and she was like, oh, it was disgusting.
So perhaps for everybody who hasn't seen Midnight, has everybody seen Midnight Cowboy?
I'm hoping
Who
if you're
hasn't
sitting
seen
here,
Midnight
you've
Cowboy?
seen Midnight Cowboy. No? Okay, well.
Oh,
get
one
busy.
person hasn't seen Midnight Cowboy. I do a little, very, 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 very short summary. So Andy Warhol wanted to do a movie, and something of that happened. The movie is called My Hustler. So you get the idea. But Andy Warhol didn't succeed making the real movie he wanted to do. And then a mainstream movie was made called Midnight Cowboy that's based, don't quote me on that, it's just my own theory, it's based on the Warhol idea. But there's also a scene in the factory in that movie, and it's Dustin Hoffman, and it's this amazing hunk, what is it,
Jon Voight.
Jon Voight, but they basically, after freezing to death and everything you can imagine.
Brenda
happening.
Vaccaro and 𝘠𝗵𝗲 𝗠𝗃 are the main things now.
And then they drive, no, they don't drive, they take a bus, right?
They take a bus.
They take a bus, and then they arrive in the warmth of Florida. And of course, he's dead. It's so sad.
And that's what made me want to come to Miami.
He's a little morbid, right? So.
No, to me, it was like the most romantic thing. And if anybody knows well Mark Morris, or some people do,
Yeah.
I was doing my best in 1980 to be a cowboy. And he was like a mean, chip on his shoulder, cripple. Like he dragged his foot the same way Dustin Hoffman did. So like, it's very like, that's what I was, escaping. Like we had that relationship. And I don't know, it was very Midnight Cowboy. Anyway, so you were asking about cinema, how you see these things in the 60s, like a still from that. It's a movie, it's rated X. But one of the first things I wanted to do when I got to be 18, because I think it was still rated X in 1980, and there wasn't VHSs, was see Midnight Cowboy, which I probably saw in Cambridge at a film festival or something. I don't know, and it revolutionized, it had it all as far as I was concerned.
What is the soundtrack of you coming to Miami? What music were you listening?
Well, I think I said in an interview here, the only music that played in 1984 was Sade, basically. And it was coming out of every car and it was great. And we loved it because here was that last, the other thing we were escaping in the 80s were the 80s. You know what I mean? It seemed horrible to us, like the current condition of culture, except for maybe the B-52s, Culture Club, da-da-da-da, but the basic, quotidian culture around you was oh, gross. So Miami helped you give the illusion that it was another period of time. And Sade comes along giving you Billie Holiday, which we were steeped in, and she seemed so classy and it was great and everybody loved it. And I love a pop song that unites the whole world. And I think she really did. And so that record played on our little child's record player endlessly. But it's also where...
So we have the movie, we have the music. Fashion wasn't really a thing then, right? Because...
Was it? Yeah, no. I mean, it was nice that the 80s brought in day-glow colors. And in 1977 to 1979, you couldn't really get that in the suburbs, but you saw it in London. Now in Miami Beach, you could have access to day-glow bathing suits. It was fun.
How did you make a living?
I worked at Voorhies as a busboy.
Can you explain to us what that entailed?
What a busboy is? Yes, I will explain.
Did my face fall down
I will explain to this well-heeled crowd what a busboy is. It's not a waiter. It's the person that goes around and picks up your dishes at the Casa Tua. The person that grabbed your plate after your brunch and took your silverware is the busboy. And that's what I was.
And for how long did you do that?
A few months. And my claim to fame about that is I waited on the actual ink spots. Do you know who that is?
No.
The ink spots? Great vocal group of the 40s came to Wolfie's because they were doing some like Miami Beach nostalgia thing. And
What was the first money you earned with your art?
first one, oh, good question. There's a picture in there, I can tell you. There's a picture of a beautiful blonde woman in there. She's smoking a cigarette, and she's got like all satin in the background. And she was a actress model, and wanted a new picture for her little business card, because the old business card is in there too. She's like new wave and wearing like lips on the t-shirt, and she wanted something more glamorous and sophisticated. And I thought I could give her that, and she gave me $50 to take that picture.
Wow.
Which you said looked like a 𝗃𝗏, and I thought looked like a 𝗃𝗏 at the time. 𝗃𝗏, famous Hollywood photographer. I'm glad I'm playing to you guys. You know, whatever. So that was $50 I made from taking a picture, which, believe me, made me very excited.
When you look at the Boston School, God, now I had a relapse. I talked again about the Boston School. But when you also look at your pictures here, they look like art is life and life is art. What does that say? What does that mean? It means that there was no difference between what you lived and how you lived and with whom you lived and what your art showed, what your art expressed. Is that an illusion, or was that?
Yeah, it's completely an illusion. I mean, you know, it's an illusion. It's, yeah.
Is it an illusion even in retrospect? Because yesterday we walked through the show and you thought like, oh, I decorated that apartment, and then there was a shoot in Vogue. And so it's kind of course, an illusion, but it's also, it was your life. You did decorate the apartment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird trick that, like, you know, gets to be played. Yeah, if you photograph it, it becomes real. But I know my main impulse in 84, 85 was to take pictures that made my life look like a movie. And you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't thinking my life is like a movie. I was thinking, if I frame it this way, it'll look like a movie, or it'll look like, you know, this life.
I ask it differently. So when you go through the show, there is this big photo collage that starts with Midnight Cowboy, and then there is these two boys. One of them is Jack and Jonathan at the time. There's these two boys, and there are lots of photographs of you two boys, and you're driving, and you're arriving in Miami. So that's now a work of art, but it was also the person you wanted to be in love with, no?
Exactly, but it also looks like a still from a road movie in the 70s, you know what I mean? And that's why I liked it, and that's why that one got printed that big, was because, like, wow, we look like we're doing something here. But really, we were just having a hamburger, you know? But I get that it looks cinematic, and I like that about it, and I like that it's me, and I like that it's somebody, and I like that it's my real life, but I'm throwing it up to you because it looks so good. Not because, like, oh, remember that day we had the hamburger?
Tell me a little bit about your home decorating period in Miami.
Well, I decorate every space I walk into. I mean, I don't know. It's just like, I need it to look a certain way for me to be comfortable. So the first little apartment, which you see depicted in the bedroom, was the best I could do at that time, given the circumstances of a $55 a week, you know, made it work. Like, get this graphic top sheet at the thrift store. And I go, like, that's the best I could do. The thing that happened was, because I had all this Miami Beach experience, by the mid-'80s, 86, 87, I had gone back to New York. I was telling other artists, like, Miami Beach, it's so fantastic and it's cheap. And one of them dragged me down there, who was way more successful than me, and showing at the Robert Miller Gallery. And he was like, yeah, it is great. I'll rent this place. And he rented a big place on Washington Ave and used it as a winter studio. And then I got to go down and hang out when he wasn't there. And so I was still, like, there mid-'80s, periodically watching the changes. And then it finally reached the ears of Robert Miller, who was at the time the most classy gallery in New York. He showed at the Fuller Building in 1957th Street. Everything was meticulous and flawless. The typeface, the catalogs, the color of the walls was not exactly white like all the other galleries. It was kind of a bone creamer beige, like everything was like, mwah, like that. A lot of that had to do with John Chime, who was the director there. Anyway, somehow Robert Miller, whatever, maybe I had blonde hair, and Roberto was pitching me as this cool guy. I still wasn't really, I was making little weird paintings in the studio on 42nd Street. And he was like, oh yeah, he's great. He knows Miami in and out. And at the time I had a very handsome boyfriend that was like, very Robert Miller, Bruce Weber. And so between the two of us, Bob was like, want to go to Miami for the weekend? Show me around. I've been hearing a lot about it. And he didn't say it like that, but he was much more like, I hear Miami Beach is kind of interesting. Would you like to go down, you and Andrew? And so he puts us up it was the first time anybody put us up in a hotel. There was one hotel that was kind of acceptable at that point. I forget what it was called, like the Park Haven. You can't find it under the cheap lights on Ocean Drive now, but it was the place that people could stay, kind of. But it was still shit on a lot. They had built South Point Tower, which is now the shortest building down that end of town. There used to be a dog track. It was empty. That below First Street was vacant sand. They built South Point Tower. He walked in pre-construction. It was still painted gray and cement. We took a tour, and we went to the penthouse, and it was $550,000.
Oh, wow.
For a penthouse, 3 bedrooms, 2-story duplex penthouse in the tallest building. And he was like, yeah, I think I'll get it. And I was like, what? And he was like, the lobby's horrible because it was 80s and postmodern and gross. And he was like, what could be done to make this place cool? And I was like, I don't know. I think you'd have to move in a punk rock band and let them live for 6 months. And he was like, well, what are you doing? Can you do it? And based on nothing, kind of, except that, whatever. And I was
Did he give you a budget?
He didn't give me a budget per se, but he had good stuff. We started shopping the New York flea market every Sunday. He introduced me to Fred Hughes. Yeah, that used to be on 26th Street.
Yeah, but that apartment was here.
I know. So guess what? When it comes time to be occupied, he's like, I'm going to hire some movers to bring all the stuff down that we got. And I was like, how much is that going to cost? He was like, I don't know, a couple $1,000s. I was like, I'll rent a truck and do it. So he gave me the couple $1,000. We drove this stuff down, and I set it up. And he was basically said, do whatever you want. And so we didn't let them lay the horrible floor that was going to be put in, and left it bare cement, painted that with patio paint, bright turquoise. I walked from the beach every day with big lumps of coral that you could still find on the beach, outlined the whole thing with it. I would drag in dead palm trees. I painted one wall Dago pink, one wall Dago green, made the thing into this wild, chic place. I had Taboo come down and do one of the bedrooms.
I think we witnessed just a huge, big lie. I said art and life, life and art is separate. Yes, it's very separate. And then he's like, I did performance. Oh, I was walking from the beach, carrying corals and painting everything pink. I think that was just a big, big fat lie. So you were basically making an installation.
I think I just thought it was cool. And one of the things we bought down here, and this is formative. One of the things we bought down here was a piece of advertising, just a photograph of girls on the beach. Yeah. But it had the little Kodak thing in the corner, and it was framed in beautiful aluminum. And it was just a snapshot this big on the wall. And I hung it, on the entryway, and kitsch or, whatever. But seeing a snapshot that big was like, that is so cool looking. And I think a year later, when I came, I think I went back to New York, and I was showing Mark Morrisroe the pictures I had taken, which were developed as snapshots. And he was like, yeah, they're okay, but they're snapshots. And I was like, oh. He was like, you know, whatever, they need to be bigger. And so a year after that, probably, I walked by a place in the Lower East Side that was where I got film developed. And they had this, you know, special posters, $9.99, make your memories into posters. And they were about this big. And it was a girl at, you know, a Puerto Rican girl at her sweet 16. And it looked great. Like, just this big made it seem so something. You know what I mean? And at that time in 1990, photography was hot, 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 but it was also this big, and cost about $3,000 a piece to get on the wall, and you had to have 30 of them to have a show.
And it wasn't really art.
And it wasn't really, it's still not really art, but...
I think that changed in the last 15 years or so, but I do remember, so I'm very happy that we caught you in your delusional origin story that you were just like a photographer. So for me, it's very, very important to think of you as such a multidisciplinary artist. And from the origin story you just told us, how you basically brought together, it's very cinematic, it's very, you're a colorist, you are doing assemblages, collages, you're doing montages, and that's all in the exhibition in
You're right,
in some way and form. So art is life and life is art. So I actually hoped that, because otherwise I would be crying here, totally delusional. Oh, it was just fake. So I remember I walked into 𝗃𝗃 Gallery. She was in Soho at the time. And I don't know why 𝗃𝗃 and Colin Deland, who were a couple, at the time thought I was worth their time, because I was a kid from Berlin and they were the superstars. And Colin Deland, gallerist who, I don't know, he had a golden touch. And 𝗃𝗃 was one of the first gallerists that there's Paula Cooper, there was Barbara Gladstone and 𝗃𝗃, and they were like magicians. She was a goddess. And so they invited me for dinner. I said, God, so whatever. Perhaps they mistook me for somebody. And then I went to the gallery, and she was one of the first in Soho at the time. And there was an exhibition, and it was called Angel Youth. And it was everything I wanted and everything I was afraid of. I, at the time, lived with a performance artist, perhaps the performance artist of our times. But that means somehow I was in the wrong movie, possibly, maybe. But so I saw this gallery show, Angel Youth, and it had everything that I wanted to desire. It had color, it had palm trees, it had the summer, it had beauty, it had bodies. It had incredibly beautiful bodies. For me, it expressed your desire and your sense of beauty, but it nearly had a temperature to it. It nearly had a soundtrack to it. Angel Youth, and I wanted to take that to Berlin. And we had no climate control in Berlin, and we had no windows, basically, and no roof, but we got an offer from the Guggenheim Museum to take over the Felix González-Torres retrospective at the time, until they came and thought we had no windows, so better don't do that. And I remember I wanted to take that show. Say a little bit about that body of work, because I think it was a very formative body of work.
Well, now I get to throw it back in your face, I guess. I guess I get to, you know, it's funny, memory, right? And delusion.
Yes.
Because there were
so it wasn't in New York. It was actually a completely different show.
Yeah, I don't think that occurred. I had two shows at 𝗃𝗃.
Yeah.
One was a group show, get this lineup, me with photography, Mary Howman and Jessica Stockholder. And I had a nice long strip of blurry photographs that could have had color, bodies, palm trees, maybe. Boom, Mary Howman, Jessica Stockholder.
Yeah.
Because the photographs were pinned to the wall. They were
Yes.
like, that's how I was doing it. So it was like the materiality of photography worked okay. Like, I would never dream of hanging a photograph next to a painting or a Jessica Stockholder. Pat did, because she's a genius, like you said. And then I had a solo show upstairs in the loft that included a little stage like you see in here, and a room setup of the kitchen and record player that was the $55 a week hotel thing. And then, like, you know, piece of carpet and a torn piece of velvet with a picture of the Ronettes on it. That was the other show at Pat Hearn. So I don't know, like, maybe you saw, I don't know.
I think I made one show out of both.
Yeah, maybe. That could be.
Was that a formative body of, was that a formative
Yeah,
body
totally.
of work?
Totally.
𝗃𝗃 did a little book. I treasured that book.
Oh, thank you. He's talking about this little book called Angel Youth that was published by my dealer in Cologne, Aurel Scheibler, and it was a nice little book of color photograph. It went, like, I thought we were going to do like a 4-page thing, and this very generous man was like, no, it has to be more, and it was, all of a sudden came back a little book. And that book really sealed it for me because it circulated, and it was something new. Like, photography was being, it was printed end to end. You weren't seeing like, this is a photograph surrounded by white, sort of. It was just like, these are some pictures. And when you looked at it, you felt like I did, seeing Midnight Cowboy, like, wow, I wouldn't mind having this life somehow, I think. Or hopefully a lot of people did. And so
I think I did. So
it
I got
became,
this book.
it became my calling card somehow.
I kind of even asked Pat for your number, and didn't have much credentials, but whatever. So I visited you on 42nd Street. You had a studio, a walk-up, you had to walk up on 42nd Street. And there were, 42nd Street was very different.
It was like all peep houses, peep shows and grind houses, dirty bookstores, and, you know, it was like,
basically,
it was Midnight Cowboy.
it was Sex Central.
Yeah.
And
Don't forget drugs.
it was Sex Central and it was Drug Central. And so between the X-rated and the things, and you had to buzz. And so I went up and I saw your studio, and that was in the early 90s. The 90s for me also became a time like working on the Felix González Torres that was meant to go to Berlin. In the first edition of the book, it says it's first at the Guggenheim and then it comes to us in Berlin. He died. He died after the opening in New York. He died in 97, I think. How did AIDS, what did that do with you and your peers and the art world in the 90s? Because I remember that you couldn't live a day without being reminded it happened. And it really, how did it influence your work? How is it reflected on your work, if so?
Well, you know, Mark Marcer had already died in 1989, so we watched that happen. Even though we were kind of estranged, I still, like, you know, I went to see him, and Pat was involved with him, and he died a grisly death of AIDS. And, you know, I don't know how we went through, but, like, it just seeped in. It was scary and horrifying. But I think what it did for me was I didn't have my first show until 1990 that you know, maybe saw at Pat's, or like the first show was not at Pat's, it was at Simon Watson, but whatever. I think I better, if I'm gonna be an artist, I better get busy, because there might be only 4 years left, right? And the other thing that I would say really kicked in my whole aesthetic, making these little vignettes, deciding stuff that just existed was art, like the cardboard, the Kodak boxes, the bed springs, the this, like, okay, it's art, it's done. It's been done by time, I'll take it. It's art. Was that on 2nd Avenue in New York, during that period, there was an open air market, like a flea market. People would just spread out a blanket and sell their old crap. And it started about 10 o'clock at night and went till 3 o'clock at night. And so after you left one club, you might walk down 2nd Avenue and look at all these, bedspreads with stuff on it. Every once in a while, I'd come across one that was like an ashtray from Capri, a stack of little 50s physique photos, some, physique magazines, a picture of Betty Davis, like gay guy stuff, a gay guy's life, you know what I mean? And the first time I ever, I wanted some of the stuff and it was cheap, but I was like, it's probably stolen. I shouldn't be like, buying stolen goods. And it took me a while till I realized how consistently I was seeing these like gay guys' lives that I kind of liked and kind of wanted to have. I want to go to Capri one day, like I want to have as many of these 50s porno magazines as I can have. I realized it was like the, just stuff being thrown out of dead guys' apartments. And that was their lives. So the whole project for me is to leave a trace of a life well lived. I'm sorry to be getting so emotional, but like that's all I wanted, was to leave a trace of a life worth living. And that's what when I say like, I just picked that picture because it looked like, a movie still. That's all I don't think I knew that I didn't say like, this is what I want to do. I wasn't crying at that moment. I was just like, this would be cool if you saw the ashtray, if you saw the candle, if you saw the magazine laying there in a gallery, it might make you think I don't know, it wasn't figured out. I didn't figure out any of this till later, but that's what it's all about.
I think our generation had witnessed a generation who was only a few years older, wiped out. I was always friends with people who were much, much older than I am. And
me too, but it's getting harder to achieve.
It's also getting sad, so many goodbyes. I was close to a person who left much too early. Everybody who leaves much too early, but I was close to Susan Sontag. And she, of course, was very close to the first generation that was wiped out by AIDS. If you think about 𝗵𝗲 𝗵𝗲 and all of those. And then our generation got into puberty, and it was a miracle. I feel a lot of gratitude, and basically it's a miracle that we weren't like 5 years older or so. And then in 2003 or 2004, there was the Whitney Biennial, and you showed a work that for me reflected that a lot, that gratitude, but also beauty. But it's also what art is. I sometimes say, and it sounds like a little bit like of a platitude, for me, great art doesn't age. When you have the picture of Dorian Gray, it's not that the picture ages and Dorian Gray doesn't age. It is actually art that doesn't age. And great art should always look like it was made tomorrow. So it's frozen time. And then in the Whitney Biennial, you had a series of self-portraits. And the Whitney Biennial 2004, so you were just in your early 40s. And they were, what is art? Art is also, if you just allow yourself to be a little superficial, art is also seduction. Art is also seducing you with beauty, right? And there were these portraits of these incredibly beautiful young people, young men, and you called them self-portrait. And I thought that was audacious. I thought that was so poetic and it was so true, because that's who we want to be, or who we desire to be, or who desire to be with, or that's who we think we were. So it was an incredible body of work that will. You also did a book with that, right?
Yeah.
Say a little bit about this body of work, because I think it's incredibly important also, looking at this work, looking at your exhibition here, what that actually meant. You said you wanted to leave something. You left definitely a sense of, you are leaving a sense of beauty.
Thank you, that's nice. Because, you know, you get, like, I was, you know, a pretty big artist in 1995, and, you know, doing photography and all of it, and the photography got, like, people liked photography at that time, and so fashion comes calling at that time, and, you know, we all, like, that was nice for me, like, to be in a, like, to me, the greatest photographer that ever lived was Richard Avedon. And so, like, fashion had no, like, it wasn't like, oh, do you do like, whatever. Magazines would say, like, do you want to shoot some pictures? We'll do this fashion campaign, da-da-da-da. They wanted the blurry snapshots, you know, that looked like real life. But I didn't really want to do that. And, like, you know, that was a false situation. I wanted to achieve real fashion and editorial and play by the rules of that. Maybe my casting, maybe my locations, but I wanted it to look like real fashion or real advertising, because maybe I'd get an advertising job. So I started to do all this work and, like, really making it look like real magazine photography, which my early work looked like real snapshots without trying, kind of. I was trying to make it look like real snapshots. You know what I mean? And what's a real snapshot? I was trying to do this thing, like, make it look, maybe you'll get successful as a, and I was trying my best. And what that does is give it this anonymous quality of, like, just generic fashion somehow, or editorial. It has a language that's generic if it's being done right, I think. Like, everybody can relate. They didn't look like art to me. I could tell, like, nobody's gonna buy this as art because it looks like fashion, right? But I kept a stack of, like, these pictures that I was like, these are really good, but what? I can't really show these as art. And until I had the idea, and it was because the curator for the Whitney Biennial came calling, and, you know, I don't mean to mock curators for this, but, like, they came in, and by 2004, you know, I was a big artist in 1994. 2004, the attitude was like, you know, we thought it would be interesting to have you be in it, because, you know, so much of the young people, you know, have been influenced by, you know, work you did. And I was like, yeah, 5 years ago? Like, it was very like, it'll be cool to, like, you know, have you have a comeback. And I was like, I'm still out, like, whatever. That was really the thing they were giving me. And at that time I was painting. I've always wanted to try to get my paintings across. So I was painting all these, like, gothy black and white paintings with skulls and stuff. I was living in the desert. I was trying to make it look, so I was like, look at my goth punk rock paintings. And she was like, oh God, if I see another skull, I'll go mental. Because everybody was doing skulls at the time, right? 2004, it was Damien Hirst. Everybody was doing skulls. She comes over just like the way I had a first show, saw the stack of pictures on the desk. What are these? And I was like, off the top of my head, I said, oh, I call those self-portraits. And she was like, what? Really? Well, I think we'd like to include them in the Whitney Biennial. And I was like, good. And so I knew at that time, guess what? Remember, I never got to finish the story about the 9.99 prints pinned to the wall. That's how I got on the walls of a gallery. But I knew photography, to achieve art, had to be big and in a big frame that looked like it cost money, because that's what people wanted to look like. So we went, and I now showed with John Scheim, who was the guy that gave Robert Miller the patina that he did. It's like, what kind of frame should we have? Oh, big white floaty frame, like what? And I was like, do I have to have glass? It's so gross. And he was like, no, don't have glass. That's what makes the self-portraits great, is there's no glass on them.
I think what makes your self-portraits great is kind of like...
That's sweet. I'm not going to say the beauty and the poetry.
No,
I'm going to say they don't have
something
glass.
else. I'm not saying something else.
But
I think one thing about aging, a friend of mine who is a singer, a writer, an artist, a poet, also invented some things in punk or whatever, but she's a great thinker. And we talk about age because we're both sometimes like doing walks and we look a little rugged, whatever. And she says, Klaus, it's so interesting aging. It's like we are this house with windows and we always look out of this little house, out of the windows. And the house is like 20 years old, and the house is 30 years old, and the house is 50 years old, and in her case, the house is 79 years old now. The house is 79 years old. You always look out through the windows, and you look at people who you think you are. They're like 20, they're like 24. Hey, it's me. But you're that house that's 79 years old or 59 years old or 64 years old or whatever. And that's such a beautiful illusion in a way that you are that house, but you look with your clear eyes out of these windows and you look into a mirror, but the mirror doesn't say, hey, you and I, we are a mirror image. And I thought the audacity of calling, you're a very handsome person, but I feel the audacity of calling them self-portraits was genius. I loved it. And so,
curators would.
I think it's forever one of my favorite pieces. When you go to see the show, you see the drawings, the watercolors, you see the sculpture, you see the installation, you see the paintings, you see those little wall drawings, found objects, you see even a video. What are you working next? What's your next big project?
Oh, I don't know. What is it? Do I? You know.
Do I have to answer this? If you don't want to answer this, we have time for three questions.
I don't know. Is there anything? Oh, Elliot Templeton. Yes. Good one. The next thing is that I just decided to become a curator, art dealer, all the things, like,
Yeah.
you know. And I opened, with my partner Evan here, a gallery called Elliot Templeton. And we have a pop-up down the street. You should visit it. It puts all my installation and decorating tips on display. And, you know, and the art I like and the gay stuff I like. But, so that's the thing. Elliot Templeton.
Say a little bit what that is and where that is. And
oh, it's on 19th Street. If you walk straight out the museum and go down Liberty Avenue and turn right on 19th Street, the first little steps up with a palm tree at the top is Elliot Templeton Tuxedo Park. But there's also an Elliot Templeton in New York in Chinatown on Henry Street. And, but can I go back to one thing? And then we'll wrap it up because we're losing them. In case people couldn't figure out who he was talking about, the poet, artist, punk, Patti Smith. Bringing up Patti, he was talking about Patti Smith. You know, she's old now. But
no, she's young at heart.
Oh yeah, young at heart. But like, guess what? She gets to be as old and hagged out as she wants because she made sure there's cool pictures of her from her youth. And she was a beacon to me at 15. You know what I mean? Like, whoa, changed your life. She made sure she got on Saturday Night Live. When I pulled a portable TV in to the ice cream stand I worked at with all my local burnout friends to I was like, I'm not working Saturday night because Patti Smith is on TV. And they were like, you have to work. You can bring a TV. Turn on the TV. This is Manamet, Massachusetts. Thank you for getting it so specific. A very small town with a 50-year-old ice cream stand that I worked at, and so did every member of my family. brought the portable TV, and I'm like, Patti Smith, Patti Smith. They're all like, who's Patti Smith? What? And I was like, I get to go in and turn it on. She came on, and it was like
When was it?
1975, I think, or it was Horses. She got to be on Saturday Night Live, and I was ready. And then she's just like, a mess, this hagged out rock and roll punk rock mess, and it was just like, what? And it was like a shot heard around the world. And I was there for Patti Smith, believe me. What I didn't get until I lived in New York 15 years is, and you're gonna argue with me, but it's made up. You know what I mean? She wanted to make sure she looked like Keith Richards. Like, I wanted to make sure I looked like John Voight. You know what I mean? And you can do that, and you can make it up. And she's authentic by every means possible. But the reason she got authentic is because she moved to the city to have pictures of herself looking like a rock star.
Yeah, I think I catch you again in this art and life is art thing.
And
Trust
why
yourself.
She's lost it for me a little bit is because she's disingenuous about it now. She's like, and I walked into a club and there was Bob Dylan, and I just thought, like, Robert went right over to him, and because he was like that. And I was like, honey, you were plotting since 1964 in New Jersey to get next to Bob Dylan. Don't make it seem like, oh, it just happened. But she's selling all the iced coffee girls with sunglasses. This whole wow, she just bumped into Bob Dylan.
But of course I have to disagree, but what you're describing is what artists do.
Yeah, no, and so am I. So when I say
So
yeah,
of
it's
course
all
you
fake, that's
Love
why
it.
she taught me you could do that.
That's the fun of being a curator. You got to witness all these artists being caught in their dreams making art.
Believe me, I still now. I mean, the same thing with Ricky. I was a big Ricky Lee Jones fan. It took me forever to figure out she wasn't really like that, and neither was Tom Waits. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean I love them less.
In the end, we all wake up every morning being a just boring human being that might actually be anxious or whatever. But then what do you make out of it during the day?
Exactly.
And we are very fortunate
entertain
that
yourself.
Some people make art, right?
Yeah,
It makes
exactly.
our life bearable.
I don't think it makes it less to have it be, a fantasy. And that's what you're talking about is is it real? Is it art? Is it real? Is it art? Anyway, we should wrap up. The one thing I want to say is, see that guy over there, the handsome guy with the long hair?
Oh, he's hiding. Sylvia, do we have to? Yeah.
That's Manuel Hurtado. And he made this show happen more than I. He's the real Jack Pierson. And Sophia. Exactly. Oh, right, Sophia's there. Oh my God, yeah, she made it happen too. Okay, let me tell you about Sophia. She is you need people like her because she cracks a whip. Where's his thing? I need to know. What are the measurements? Choose the color. And I'd be like, it's all gonna work out. The color will be fine. What's going here? And I was like, something big. And she's like, what though? And I was like, I'm gonna figure it out, don't worry. And she dealt with it. It's nice to see you, Sophia, thank you. And James and Everett, Sylvia, the whole museum, thank you. And Klaus, I can't believe it, that you want to introduce me.
Thank you all again. Thank you both, Jack and Klaus. I really appreciate it.